How's it going, listeners? You're in for an exciting episode as I am breaking down one full year out of a W-2 job and what I've learned during this past year. So hang in for this episode and we'll get right to it. So if you haven't listened to this podcast before, this is the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast where I, Chris Rickenbaugh, am documenting my journey in real estate and business while also talking a little bit about travel hacking and personal finance. You can find me everywhere on Instagram and TikTok at leadway.wealth, and you can check out figuringitoutfinance.com where you're going to be able to stay updated on all of the podcasts, and it'll have all of the links and where this podcast is available everywhere you listen to podcasts. So let's jump into today's episode. I'm covering one full year out of a W-2 job, recording on April 3rd, and this is the day that I quit last year. So I want to break down a couple different things, why I decided to quit, some lessons I've learned, and then what are the best parts about being out on my own. So let's start with, why did I decide to quit a W-2 job that had normal income coming in and to go out and, figure out real estate? So it's plain and simple. I didn't see the future of the business being able to grow. The company I was in, I was doing sales for a sticker company, and I was employee 3 because it was just a couple working. And basically how their model was at the time was, they would do their marketing, leads would come in, and then you would have to do all the packaging and the ordering and all of this. So basically what happened, and what I've heard on some other podcasts, is when you have all of those leads coming in, they start piling up because what they wanted to do was, this is your lead, this is your customer. So you're the lead, or you're the salesperson for that customer. So the problem is when you're getting all of those leads, they just start stacking on top of each other. Say you get 100 in one day, or, that's just a wild example, but say you get 100 in a week, and then another 100 next week. And then it all starts stacking on top of each other, and the workload becomes crazy. And then you're not able to get to things. And the idea that they had was they wanted to max everyone out 110% and then hire somebody else to be able to do that same thing. So what I was saying on day 2 that I was saying in month 7 was, look, I was not the right hire. You should have hired an operations person to be able to handle all this backroom packaging and shipping, and that'll get your time back in here to be able to go make more sales and then figure out that business model. And they said, no, we just need more sales. But they couldn't see that bigger picture because, if they had the money that they said they have, then what they would have been able to do is they would have been able to hire an operations person, and then they would have been able to, bring in a leads manager or some type of administration position that was handling all of those leads. And then what that would have done for both of them is given them more of an owner role, to where, they're owners of the business, and it's not like, oh, you're a salesperson. Because we're not going into these buildings. I think I only went on one appointment the whole year. Otherwise, it's just a full-scale, online marketing business. So, it just wasn't going to be able to grow without me, just killing myself and, with it taking up all my time. And the one quote that really, flipped my mindset was when the boss at the time, he said, I just want you to give up your life for the next year so I can grow this business. And I have that down in a quote. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm out of here. So, we went down that road and, they started handing more things on top of me. I wasn't going to be able to get to more work. And then it just, I had to say, nope, can't do this anymore. So I crafted the plan and said, I was interviewing for another job, and that's another time for another story, but didn't end up getting that job where, it was actually a past boss that called or, got notified, and because 2 of the other people I was working with at that time, they got the job and I didn't. And so, something was a little fishy there, but didn't end up getting that job. But I had already quit after that interview and then said, all right, I'm either going to get this job or I'm going to figure out something in real estate. So didn't get the job, and now we are figuring it out in real estate. So if you've been listening to this podcast, that's where I started the Figuring It Out Finance podcast and then the Figuring It Out Finance channels, because I'm like, well, here we are. We're just going to be able to figure out where this thing is going and how to be able to do this. So, what I've been doing for the past year is kind of that timeline of left the job, and then I went with my girlfriend, now wife, beautiful wife at the time, and then, or she was girlfriend at the time, now wife. We went to Colombia for a week. That's where I found out I didn't get the job, and I said, well, at least I'm going to have kind of like a nice relaxing week, knowing it's like, well, I just don't have to worry about it this week. So, came back, and it took a little bit. I got the stuff set up for the podcast, started doing some social media stuff and start learning. And then a couple weeks in, I read, the main one was From Passive to Passionate by Brian Lubin. I wanted to sign up for his group and just had some things happen to where I couldn't quite join. And, on the financial side for me. So I'm still looking at joining it, but I read his book and it really shifted my mindset. And he pointed out a couple other books on his podcast. And one was the 12-week year. So I'm about 3 weeks into this 12-week year after I get back from Colombia. And I'm thinking, well, I should probably start having some real estate goals here. And, with no money, I'm like, well, how am I going to flip with no money? I didn't understand hard money or really private money at that time, even though I'd been listening to real estate stuff for probably the last 2 to 3 years. Then I finally, I'm like, all right, I got to walk 5 houses this week. So I just called agents on houses that I was interested in that needed work or I thought would be a good subject to opportunity. In the second house, my now partner was representing that house, and we were walking through it, just kind of get to talking, and she's like, well, if you're looking at flipping or doing something creative like seller finance and some other things, it's like, well, I have this flip going down in Charlotte. Do you want to come check it out? And I was like, well, sure. I don't have anything else going on. So, that ended up being a little bit of a longer day, but I said, well, what I'm really looking for right now is the expired listings. And she goes, well, expired listings is the thing that I need to get to right now and just don't have the time for. So I said, well, why don't I make the calls? And we started from there. And then about a month after that is when she said, you should really start, you should do a flip. You should do a flip. So I finally did the flip, got one under contract that I liked, and then history from there. So I bought that flip at the end of May. Let me see here. Completed projects 5/31. So May 31st is when I bought my first flip. And so yeah, almost 2 full months out of a job before I bought anything. And then that's a learning lesson in itself, which you can go back and listen to when I actually, on this podcast, when I actually documented the entire thing from quitting my job to buying that first flip to all the way to now. I've been doing about 2 or 3 podcasts a week. So go back and listen to that after this podcast. But let's break into the lessons that I've learned. So if you set a clear vision for your life a few years out, it will help guide your path. And that's, basically the clarity you're able to get on what you really want. So, you start doing these things, you get a job, and then you're like, hey, this isn't working. So then you ask, it's like, well, what do I really want? And most people don't ask that question. All they think is, well, this is normal. I don't have to like my job. It brings in money. It's like, no, there's something different out there. So if you set the clear vision with no restrictions on what you truly want in life, you're able to craft that vision and then move towards that goal. So, and then the second one here is, it is not easy. So it is super scary to start and, start on that first flip project, to be able to buy that and know, hey, I don't have $35,000 to be able to close on this house. How am I going to be able to buy it? I had $20,000 in my pocket when I did a refinance on my house, and I'm like, all right, 20 grand. I got 6 months to figure it out. Let's go. So, I didn't have the $35,000 to be able to close on that house, and, just being super resourceful about a week or two into having it under contract. I finally reached out to a guy who I'd stay at his Airbnb. I'm like, hey man, are you interested? He's like, oh yeah, like let me take a look. So we ended up partnering on that, funding me, and I was able to give him a 20% return. So really cool stuff there. And it was super, super scary to be able to get that thing under contract and not know exactly where that money is coming from, but just like oh no. So being able to tell everybody what you're trying to do is going to be able to help you, because that universe is going to be able to help conspire, to help you towards your goals. And that was one of the biggest things that I learned is, you got to tell everybody, you got to use all your resources. It's going to be scary. You're going to feel dumb sometimes, but being able to get started and, get past that scary feeling, because nobody really cares anyway. So go for your goals, set that clear vision, and then move towards it and tell everybody what you're doing. And then if you don't start now, you're not going to have the chance to improve. And this is one of the big things with social media that I learned was, you want to have that perfect video right away. You want to be like all the influencers, have those clear videos. And really, you just got to pull out your phone and start recording you talking. Yes, it'll take a couple times. But, now last year, it was super difficult for me to try and figure out how to edit, how to do this and that. And now I can do a video within a minute and then have it posted on TikTok and Instagram. Super easy. And now it's like, okay, well, how do I grow that video? That's another interesting thing, but I'm so much better at it. I'm so much better, in front of the camera talking, and then just podcasts in general, where I was at then, those first probably 100 episodes are pretty rough. And, just being able to find that flow talking, being able to set up the questions in the podcast to be able to, just move through it, that's difficult too. But being able to have 120 some of these now, you're able to really, find your flow, understand how it goes, and then I can start bringing guests on. So let's move through here. So, being in this business, I'm starting to learn that you need to run it like a business. And what I mean by that is being able to have those systems and processes and, read the book. So I'm reading Profit First right now. Big game changer. I feel just after reading it, having the account set up, it's a pain in the ass trying to move all the bank accounts and stuff and trying to it's like, well, how am I going to be able to it's easier having it in Chase to where I can just move the money really quick and get that card paid. But how's that going to be when I switch it over to Relay? Is there going to be a day or two? Do I have to plan it out different? And we're going to figure that out. So another thing here is working on things that move the needle. So I feel like that bank change is going to be a really big needle mover. Being able to take that time and, sit down for 20, 30 minutes and read a book that's going to be able to improve your business. Being able to listen to that podcast in the car, it might be boring. I listen to a lot of, business and wholesale podcasts. I'm like, I don't even do those, but it's been able to help me and really move that needle. 10X is easier than 2X has really changed the game for me too. And that was another book I just kind of held off on reading. So finally read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense to me. I should set that goal 10 times higher because I'm going to surpass whatever 2X goal that I had. So when I'm in the Deal Flow Mastermind, I said, my goal is to flip 10 houses in this next 6 months, and somebody else is over here with, 3. So they're reaching out to about 6 to 8 people a week, and my goal is to reach out to almost 30. It's like, who's going to have more success? Even if I don't hit 10 properties, I'm probably going to be well and above 2 or 3. So that's just the mindset change that's been really, really big for me, and that book is huge. But the most difficult thing I'd say of what I've been learning and what I've gone through over this last year is the emotions, man. That's been such a rough time on me because you don't know how the flip's going. It's your first time doing it, getting to the closing table. How am I going to raise $30,000 to $40,000 to be able to close on this house? That's a ton of emotions, and being able to just get that all structured and, move through the emotions, that has easily been the toughest part. And, there's been 3 houses I've had under contract that didn't end up closing, and having to go through that pain of like, oh my gosh, like I just lost money. Oh my gosh, this flip has taken me 7 months. Like, is this thing going to sell? And they're, asking me for more money. Like, how am I going to come up with that? I've been really lucky to have a really good partner and then a really good wife that's been able to kind of support and help me understand it. And, just being in this mastermind, knowing that other people are going through the same thing and have been through it. And then once you get on that other side, it's going to be well worth it. And I feel that, and I can see that little end point to where it's like, oh, I'm over the hump. Thank God. So, the emotions have definitely been tough, especially when, you're talking to somebody and they don't quite get real estate. They've been in a job and they're telling you, oh my gosh, that's so scary. How are you going to do this? And it's like, talking to other people makes me so nervous about it. Because, when I'm here on my own, it's like, it's pretty clear what I have to do. And then talking to somebody who doesn't understand the game, that's really nerve-wracking. That really messes with me. So it's been, if I have to listen to the same podcast that gets me in that right mindset to be able to go and do this thing, then that's what I need to do. Even if it's the same, like 5 to 10 podcasts, it's more of the mindset over anything else. Your network is your net worth. I think that's another really big one. I'm learning that now. And I've heard it said before to where you're, the people who have a really deep network really never have to go and like try and find deals because they're all coming to you. If you're that guy who's able to close, you're able to say, hey, does anybody have anything? Or, they come to you with that opportunity to be able to invest. So, or invest or flip or whatever. So, by doing that, you're creating opportunities for yourself, and that your network is your net worth. So, moving into the last parts here, what is the best part of working for myself? It's easily 100% the time. The money's going to be really cool when that accumulates, but I've only made $8,000 in this whole last year. And that's going to scare a lot of people, but also when we sell this duplex, it's going to be about a $60,000 to $70,000 profit. So, that's going to almost 10x what I've made in this past year. It's just because I've had to delay any sort of profit on the one that was flipping for 7 months, but being able to see that little light at the end of the tunnel is really cool, but only $8,000 in year one. And that's called stress right there. But once you understand stress is just is the achiever's word for fear. So that was another quote that really helped me. It's like, oh, every time I say that I'm stressed or kind of like relate to it, it's like, oh, you're just stressed. It's like, no, I'm worried. I'm fearful. And then once you understand it from there, it's like, oh, it's just fear. Why am I scared? And go from there. But back to the best parts of working for myself, it's 100% the time. Time was super important to me. I got really spoiled in my senior year of college, or not my senior year, junior year. When we were in COVID, we only had 1 class a week, had tons of time. And then my buddies or school shut down for basically 2 months. During the November after COVID had already been complete because they were worried there was going to be an outbreak or something. So everybody was gone for about 2 to 2.5 months. And all I did, I was hurt. I would go to the gym for about an hour and a half, and then read. I read a ton of books. Had a lot of time to myself, did a lot of personal growth during that time. And I'm like, man, this is freaking awesome. Like, I can do whatever I want. I can go sit out by the pool if I want to and read and just learn and learn and learn, and didn't have barely any expenses, didn't have to work at that time. So, that was a really, really big time period for me. I'm like, man, if I could get close to this just about every single day, I'm like, that's what I want. So being able to have this schedule, it's a lot like that, but I also do have to be able to put in the work on something that I'm passionate in to be able to, make money. So plus I wouldn't have been able to make the connections I made if I was still working a normal job. So when I say your network is your net worth, I wouldn't be able to go to lunch or coffee with that investor. I wouldn't be able to go look at houses. Being able to meet up with those people and talk to a bunch of people on the phone, I wouldn't be able to do it the way that I'm doing if I was working a normal W-2 job. So that's easily one of the biggest things that I've learned in this past year. So that's about all I got for this podcast. So if you're still listening at this point, we have a super special guest. And when I say we, I really mean me. So I have a really cool guest that I've met in this area, flipping in the same area that I am, and he's been doing it for a little bit longer than me. So we've been able to, talk back and forth, try and help each other out. And I thought I said, man, like, why don't we get you on the podcast? Like, let's tell your story. How are you doing it? And it'll be a really, really good how-to for someone to basically get started in flipping. And, another person's mindset on where they were at when they got started. So make sure you tune in for that episode. But this is all I got for you today. So if you're still listening, go check out leadway.wealth on TikTok and Instagram. You can stay up to date on everything that I'm doing in this business, and you'll find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you so much for tuning in. And here's to the next year out of a W-2 job, and you'll be able to see it all documented here on the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast. This is Chris Rickenbaugh signing off for episode 123 of the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast.